This dish has no smaller version. By Eressa. Chapter 1, The Almost Date. Mara Alvarez decided 20 minutes in that this wasn't going to be a real date. Not because anything had gone wrong. That was the problem. Nothing ever went wrong. Things simply thinned out. Like soup that had been watered down until it technically counted as dinner but left you restless an hour later, staring into the fridge like it had personally failed you. Caleb, call me Cal, he'd said, sat across from her at the cafe's small round table, hands folded politely around a mug of oat milk latte he'd ordered with careful emphasis, as if to say I'm considerate. He nodded at the right moments. He asked questions that sounded correct. He laughed softly, never too loud, never too much. He was doing everything right. Which meant Mara was already preparing to disappear. The cafe was warm in that intentional, curated way: exposed brick, hanging plants, the low murmur of conversation layered with indie music that felt like it had been approved by a committee. The kind of place where no one ever spilled anything loudly. The kind of place where people leaned in, speaking with purpose, as if intimacy was something you could summon by proximity alone. Mara shifted in her chair, the full leather seat making a faint sound against her jeans. She'd chosen this outfit carefully. Black wrap dress. Soft, forgiving fabric. Boots she could walk home in. Nothing that asked to be seen too much. Nothing that suggested she was trying. Trying had never been rewarded. So, Cal was saying, smiling in a way that showed his teeth but not his gums. What do you like to do for fun? It was the third time he'd asked it, phrased slightly differently each time, like he was scrolling through preset options. Mara smiled back. She was good at this part. I cook a lot, she said. I read. I hang out with friends. She didn't say, I fantasize about a version of myself who takes up space without apology. She didn't say, I'm tired of being the interesting stopover before someone finds their forever. Cal nodded, pleased. That's nice. Cooking is very grounding. Grounding. Another approved word. She watched him absorb her answer and place it neatly into a mental box labeled acceptable woman in her 30s. He was probably already imagining how he'd describe her to someone else later. She's really sweet, he'd say. Very chill. Chill meant, won't ask for more. They talked about work. Mara explained her job without passion, sanding off the edges that might sound like ambition. He told her about his startup, using words like pivot and runway. She nodded, interested enough. She always was. This was the dance. Give them room. Be easy. Be grateful for the attention. Don't flinch when they talk about an ex who was a lot. Don't ask what that meant. Cal glanced at his phone, then back at her, apologetic. Sorry. Just, my roommate. He's feeding my cat. Of course, Mara said automatically. Her hands moved to her mug, though it was empty now. She liked having something to do with them. He put the phone away and leaned back, studying her with what might have been interest, or might have been assessment. You're really easy to talk to, he said. There it was. Mara felt the familiar tightening just below her ribs. Easy. Low maintenance. No sharp edges. The kind of person you could enjoy without rearranging your life. Thanks, she said, because that was what you said when someone complimented you for being small. They ordered pastries they didn't really want. She picked at a croissant, flakes scattering onto the plate. Cal talked about a hiking trip he was planning with friends. She smiled and asked questions. He didn't invite her. That was fine. This wasn't going anywhere. The realization didn't sting the way it used to. It settled instead, heavy and dull, like a weather system she'd learned to recognize from a distance. No storm. No drama. Just the slow confirmation of what she already knew. She was a good intermission. An hour later, they stood outside the cafe, the early evening air cool against her skin. Streetlights flickered on. Somewhere down the block, someone laughed loudly, unself-conscious. "This was nice," Cal said, stepping just close enough to suggest a hug without committing to it. "It was," Mara agreed. They hugged. His arms were brief, careful. He smelled faintly of cedar and something medicinal. "We should do this again sometime," he said. She smiled. "Yeah. Sometime." They both knew they wouldn't. Mara watched him walk away, already pulling out his phone, already elsewhere. She waited until he'd turned the corner before releasing the breath she'd been holding since she'd arrived. Her stomach growled. She hadn't finished the croissant. She hadn't ordered dinner. She'd been too focused on not wanting too much, not being too much. The hunger surprised her with its insistence. Physical, yes, but threaded through with something sharper. She started walking home. Her apartment was only 6 blocks away, through streets she knew by heart. The neighborhood was quiet but alive, windows glowing, the scent of garlic drifting from somewhere, a dog barking once and then stopping. She passed a taqueria she loved and didn't go in. She passed a bakery and kept walking. There was food at home. There was always food at home. Inside her apartment, she kicked off her boots and dropped her bag on the chair by the door. The space was small but warm, every object chosen slowly over time. Plants crowded the windowsill. A half-used cookbook lay open on the counter, a sticky note marking a recipe she'd meant to try. She opened the fridge and stared. Leftovers. Half a container of rice. Vegetables she'd roasted 2 nights ago. Nothing that felt like what she needed. Mara leaned her forehead against the fridge door, the cold seeping into her skin. It wasn't that the date had been bad. That was the cruelest part. If it had been bad, she could have been angry. If he'd been rude or dismissive or obviously uninterested, she could have walked away clean. Instead, she felt erased by politeness. She closed the fridge and stood there, arms folded around herself. In the quiet, her thoughts grew louder. "You should be grateful," a familiar voice whispered. "People like him don't usually go for someone like you." She hated that voice. She also believed it. Mara moved to the counter and poured herself a glass of water. She drank it standing up, then another. Her hunger didn't fade. It sharpened. She thought of the way Cal had looked at her, not unkindly, but without heat. As if she were a well-made chair. Comfortable. Useful. Not something you built a room around. She pressed her fingers into the soft curve of her stomach through her dress, grounding herself. This body had carried her through 34 years. Through joy and grief and long afternoons and worse nights. Through meals that were celebrations and meals that were negotiations. It deserved more than this. Mara turned on the stove. She cooked without a recipe, the way she always did when she was trying to remember herself. Oil in the pan. Garlic, sliced thin. Vegetables chopped with care, the steady rhythm of the knife calming her breathing. She cracked an egg into the pan and watched it spread, the edges crisping just enough. The smell filled the apartment, rich and familiar. As she ate, leaning against the counter, the hunger eased, not just in her stomach, but somewhere deeper. She felt herself settle back into her body, back into the present. She wasn't unlovable. She wasn't asking for too much. She was just tired of being almost. When she finished, she washed the dishes slowly, deliberately. She wiped down the counter. She placed the leftover rice back in the fridge, already imagining how she might turn it into something better tomorrow. Her phone buzzed. A text from Lena. How was the date? Mara stared at the screen for a moment, then typed back, "Fine." She hesitated, then added, "I'm hungry." A pause. Then, "For food or something else?" Mara smiled despite herself. "Both," she typed. She set the phone down and looked around her kitchen, at the quiet evidence of care she'd given herself tonight. The world outside her window hummed on. Somewhere, someone was laughing too loudly again. Mara wiped her hands on a towel and breathed. She didn't know it yet, but this hunger, this refusal to settle, was already loosening something inside her. She was done being temporary. Chapter 2, The Cooking Class. The community center kitchen smelled like citrus cleaner and onions. Mara paused just inside the doorway, her tote bag heavy against her hip, and took it in. Stainless steel counters. A row of induction burners. Mismatched cutting boards stacked like they'd been gathered over time instead of ordered in bulk. Someone had put out a bowl of lemons for no practical reason. People were already there. That alone made her chest tighten. She'd told herself she was early on purpose, that she'd get her bearings before the room filled. Instead, the space hummed with low conversation and the soft scrape of chairs. Not crowded. Not quiet. Alive. A hand-lettered sign taped to the wall read, Queer Community Cooking, Wednesdays, 7 to 9 p.m. Below it, in smaller letters, Come hungry. Leave with leftovers. Mara exhaled. Hey. You made it. Theo Nguyen appeared at her elbow, smiling like he'd been waiting specifically for her, which she knew was unlikely but appreciated anyway. He wore an apron splattered with something red and smelled faintly of soap and chili oil. I'm Theo, he said, already holding out a name tag and marker. Grab one. Pronouns if you want, no pressure. Mara wrote Mara and, after a beat, added, she/her, in smaller letters. She stuck it to her chest and immediately resisted the urge to tug her cardigan closed over it. First time? Theo asked. Is it obvious? He laughed. Only because you're standing like you're deciding whether to bolt. Fair. We'll start in a few minutes, he said. There's water, tea, snacks, nothing fancy yet. Tonight's about knife skills and a few base sauces. Very forgiving. He leaned in conspiratorially. No one gets kicked out for uneven chopping. Mara smiled. A real one. She set her bag down at an empty station and took a glass of water. Around her, people filtered in, fat bodies, thin bodies, tall, short, soft, sharp. Queer in ways that felt lived in rather than announced. A couple holding hands without comment. Someone with a baby strapped to their chest, bouncing gently while chatting. No one looked at her twice. That unsettled her more than being stared at. Okay, friends, Theo called, clapping once. Let's circle up. They did, loosely. No one forced proximity. Theo explained the structure, pairing up, rotating tasks, checking in. His voice moved quickly but with care, like he'd learned how to keep momentum without steamrolling people. And if you don't want a partner for any reason, he added, solo stations are totally fine. No explanations required. Mara nodded, grateful. Cool, Theo said. Tonight, we're starting with something simple, a base tomato sauce you can take in a dozen directions. Comfort food without the performance. Someone snorted. Someone else murmured approval. Theo started assigning stations, glancing around as he did. Mara? She looked up. You okay partnering? Yes, she said, surprising herself with how quickly the answer came. Great. You'll be with Rowan. Mara turned. Rowan was already at the counter behind her, tying an apron around their waist with unhurried confidence. They were broad-shouldered, solid in a way that read as grounded rather than imposing. Their hair was pulled back messily, and there was flour on their forearm like a forgotten signature. They looked up and met Mara's eyes. Hey, Rowan said, easy. Looks like we're cooking together. Their voice was calm, warm, without the careful neutrality Mara had learned to brace for. Looks like it, Mara said. Rowan smiled, not big, not performative. Just there. They turned back to the counter and began laying out ingredients with practiced ease. Tomatoes. Garlic. Onion. Olive oil. Salt. Pepper. A small bunch of herbs tied with twine. You have a preference for chopping or stirring? Rowan asked. Chopping, Mara said. If that's okay. Perfect. Rowan slid a knife toward her, handle first. Sharp, but not mean. Mara blinked, then laughed softly. As they worked, the kitchen filled with sound, the steady thud of knives, the hiss of burners igniting, the rise and fall of conversation. Someone put on music, low enough not to dominate. Rowan moved with quiet certainty, humming under their breath as they heated oil in the pan. They didn't hover. They didn't correct Mara's grip or comment on her pace. They trusted her. That shouldn't have felt like a revelation. It did. So, Rowan said, glancing over. Have you done this class before? First night, Mara said. I almost didn't come. Yeah. I had a long day. Rowan nodded like that explained everything. I'm glad you did. The words landed gently, without expectation attached. Not you should be glad, not this was the right choice. Just, I'm glad you're here. Mara focused on the onion, eyes stinging, hands steady. Theo drifted by, checking on stations. Smells good already, he said. Remember, low and slow. We're not in a rush. Rowan grinned. My favorite instruction. As the sauce simmered, Rowan tasted, adjusted, tasted again. They offered the spoon to Mara without ceremony. Thoughts? She tasted. It was rich, balanced, deeply familiar. Needs salt, she said. Rowan nodded and added a pinch. Always. Their shoulders brushed as they leaned over the pot together. Not accidental. Not invasive. Just close enough to be felt. Mara's pulse kicked. Rowan didn't pull away. They stood like that for a moment, steam rising between them, before Rowan stepped back, giving space without retreat. Across the room, someone laughed warmly. Mara glanced over to see a woman with a toddler on her hip, stirring a pot one-handed while chatting easily with Theo. The woman caught Mara's eye and smiled, open, unguarded. That's Aisha, Rowan said, following her gaze. She's been coming since the class started. Refuses to leave her kid with anyone, so he just comes along. Works surprisingly well. Mara watched as the toddler reached for a wooden spoon, and Aisha redirected him with practiced ease. You cook a lot? Rowan asked. Yeah, Mara said. It's grounding. Rowan smiled, eyes soft. It is. The class wound down with laughter and the clatter of containers being filled. People traded portions, scribbled notes, promised to come back next week. Rowan packed up leftovers neatly, labeling a container and sliding it toward Mara. For you, they said. If you want it. I do, she said. Outside, the night had cooled. The streetlights cast a soft glow over the sidewalk as people filtered out in small groups. Rowan walked beside her for a block, unhurried. See you next week? They asked. Mara hesitated, just a fraction. Yeah, she said. I think so. Rowan smiled again. Good. They peeled off at the corner, offering a small wave before heading the other way. Mara stood there for a moment, container warm in her hands, heart doing something unfamiliar. She walked home slowly. For the first time in a while, she wasn't hungry. Chapter 3, Heat and Proximity. The second week, Mara arrived 5 minutes early. She noticed immediately, which annoyed her. The community center kitchen was quieter than last time, the counters wiped down but not yet claimed. Someone had opened a window, cool air cut through the warmth left over from the day. Mara set her tote down at the same station as before without consciously deciding to. She told herself it was habit. Hey. Rowan's voice came from behind her, close but not startling. Mara turned. They were already in an apron, sleeves pushed up, hands dusted faintly with flour like they'd stopped mid-thought. You're early, Rowan said, smiling. So are you. Fair. Theo bounced in moments later, clapping his hands once. Okay, friends, welcome back. Tonight we're getting into heat, literally. Stir fries, pan sauces, fast decisions. We're pairing up again, but feel free to switch if you want a different rhythm. Mara felt a small, traitorous relief when Rowan stayed where they were. Theo handed out recipe cards that looked more like suggestions than instructions. This is about paying attention, he said. Smell. Sound. Adjust. Rowan scanned the card and hummed. This one's flexible. Mara nodded. They're all flexible if you don't panic. Rowan looked at her, delighted. Exactly. They set to work. Oil heated in the pan, shimmering quickly. Rowan moved with efficiency born of repetition, but nothing about it felt rushed. They passed Mara ingredients without breaking rhythm. She chopped. They stirred. Their elbows brushed once, twice. Each time, Rowan paused, just a breath, checking without asking. Mara didn't move away. The pan hissed as vegetables hit hot oil. Steam rose, carrying garlic and ginger into the air. The sound filled the space between them, loud enough to make talking optional. Rowan leaned in to smell the pan, close enough that Mara could feel heat from their body, steady and real. Too hot? Rowan asked. No, Mara said. It's right. Rowan met her eyes, holding the look for a second longer than necessary, then nodded and adjusted the burner by a fraction anyway. That small care landed heavier than she expected. As the sauce came together, Rowan tasted and passed the spoon. Their fingers brushed, accidental this time. Mara felt it travel up her arm, sharp and grounding. Good, she said, and meant more than the sauce. Rowan's mouth curved, subtle. Yeah. Across the room, someone laughed loudly. A pan clanged. Theo offered commentary and encouragement in equal measure. The room felt fuller tonight, louder, but Mara noticed how Rowan created a pocket of calm without isolating them. You always cook like this? Mara asked. So, present? Rowan considered. When I can. It's easier with someone who's paying attention too. The implications sat between them, warm. They plated quickly, food imperfect and glossy. Rowan slid the dish toward Mara first. Eat while it's hot, they said. Mara took a bite. Heat bloomed across her tongue, bright and satisfying. She laughed, surprised. Okay, she said. That's really good. Rowan watched her eat, openly. Not evaluating. Not waiting. Just there. Mara felt it, being looked at without negotiation. She swallowed and met their gaze. When the class wrapped up, Rowan stayed behind to wipe down the counter. Mara did too, falling into step without discussion. Their shoulders bumped gently as they worked, close enough to share space without crowding it. You live nearby? Rowan asked. 6 blocks, Mara said. You? About 10. They finished cleaning in companionable quiet. Outside, the air had cooled further, the streetlights casting long shadows. People lingered in small knots, exchanging containers and goodbyes. Rowan fell into step beside Mara again. Same time next week, they asked. Mara hesitated, not because she didn't want to, but because she felt how much she did. Yes, she said. I'd like that. Rowan smiled, something a little softer breaking through their usual ease. Me too. They walked together for 2 blocks this time before parting, the distance between them stretching reluctantly. Mara continued home, her skin still warm, her hands faintly scented with oil and spice. She noticed the absence when Rowan wasn't beside her. It didn't scare her. It felt like possibility. Chapter 4, Lena names the pattern. Lena's apartment was small in the way that made you feel like someone had deliberately removed unnecessary walls. Plants crowded the windowsill, a thrift store lamp threw a soft pool of light over the couch, and a pile of magazines sat on the coffee table like a casual shrine. Mara waited in the hallway for Lena to open the door, feeling both ridiculous and relieved to be doing something that required neither chopping nor simmering, sitting with a friend. "You look like you cooked up a storm," Lena said the second she let Mara in, eyeing the faint oil sheen on Mara's hands. Lena's voice always felt like a warm towel, direct, a little rough at the edges, and uncomfortably comforting. "Just a class," Mara said, shrugging out of her jacket. "Theo made us stir-fry." "Rowan," she stopped. The name had a softness in her mouth she hadn't expected. Lena raised an eyebrow. "Rowan?" Mara felt heat rise behind her eyes. "Yeah. They're good." "Good how?" Lena asked. She sliced through vague compliments like a chef through a stale baguette. Mara tried to explain Rowan's steadiness, the way they didn't hover, the easy way they trusted her. The words came out clumsy, protective. She talked about the food, about the way her stomach felt full for the first time in days. Lena listened, then said, "Plain as rain, so you like them." "Cool. Do you want to do something other than moon at me about it?" Mara made a face. "I'm not. Don't be coy." Lena sat down and waved her hand like she was clearing a table. "You've done that and not wanting to be a burden, routine since college. You pre-reject because it's easier than being disappointed when someone does the quiet fade. You tell yourself you'll survive, so you do. But survive isn't the same as live." Mara felt her chest tighten, the familiar impulse to explain away, to give background, to shrink the truth so it would sit smaller in a room. "Lena," she started. "Nope." Lena's tone softened, though her eyes stayed sharp. "Not this time. I saw you tonight. You were different. You weren't flattening yourself into a background. But then you hesitated. You nearly said no when Rowan asked if you'd come back." "Why?" Mara opened her mouth and found only a small, honest throb, fear. "What if I'm wrong? What if I read it as something that isn't there? And what happens if you're not?" Lena asked. "You get bruised. You cry. You eat too much ice cream. You live. Or you don't try and you never know. Which life makes you madder at 40? They both knew the answer. Mara folded her hands in her lap. "I'm tired of being the woman who's interesting until someone finds someone else." Lena's face went softer. "Then stop trying to be unbreakable like it's a virtue. You don't need to armor yourself at every greeting. People will either meet you or they won't. But you," she jabbed a finger gently at Mara's chest. "You'll never know if you keep pre-canceling yourself." Mara felt the words like heat. They were blunt, but the bluntness wasn't cruel, it was precise. "Do you remember when you dated that guy from the bookstore?" Lena asked. "You liked him, you told yourself not to, you folded into a smaller you, and then you wondered why he left. He didn't leave because you were too much, he left because you offered him nothing to choose." Mara swallowed. It was true and it stung because it was a truth she hadn't wanted to own out loud. "You don't have to be loud to be seen," Lena continued. "You have to be visible. Being visible is not the same as being loud or needy. It's just being there with the full you." "How do you even start that?" Mara asked, because she didn't know. Lena shrugged like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "One thing at a time. Say yes more. Say what you want. Tell your mom that you're not asking for permission to be happy. Stand where people can reach you. If they don't, it tells you something important." Mara pictured her mother's careful disappointment, Elena's sigh that never quite reconciled with assurance. She could taste that conversation already, softly armored by worry, trimmed with cultural expectation. "I don't want to fight with her," Mara confessed. "You might," Lena said. "And then you'll also survive it. Maybe she won't understand now. Maybe she never will. But you'll have said it." A silence settled between them that was not empty. It felt like the moment before a lid comes off a jar and you realize you can actually open it. Lena got up and rummaged through her kitchen cabinet. She came back with 2 beers and a bowl of nachos, ridiculous, greasy, and perfect. You need something to cling to that isn't a person yet, Lena said, handing over a beer. Food is acceptable cling. Be proud. Mara laughed, small and honest. She took a beer and ate the nachos with a little abandon, the sharp cheese and jalapeno making her feel a private kind of safe. Okay, Lena said after a while, leaning back on the couch. Promise me 2 things. Mara looked at her. 1. Go back next week. 2. When Rowan does something small, like offer you a spoon or walk you home, don't immediately file it into the folder labeled temporary. See it. Sit with it. Let it be what it is. Mara considered. It felt like a dare and a lifeline. I can try, she said. You can do better than try, Lena said. You can show up. Mara watched her friend, felt gratitude and the soft, new pressure of possibility. She thought of the name tag stuck to her chest that first night, the way she had hesitated before writing her pronouns. She thought of standing at the stove, letting steam cloud the space between her and Rowan. I'll go back, she said, and this time the words landed solid. Lena bumped her shoulder against Mara's. Good. Now we plan an actual date night for next weekend, something you initiate. I'll help you pick an outfit that isn't neutral. Mara laughed, louder this time. When she left Lena's that night, the street felt the same, lamps dotting the sidewalks, the bakery on the corner closed except for the cleaning staff, but Mara's steps didn't feel like a rehearse. They felt like the beginning of something she hadn't been brave enough to try in a while. She slid her keys into the lock and thought of the stir-fry in the container by her door, of Rowan's steady presence, and of Lena's blunt, relentless faith. Her heart was a little less guarded than it had been that evening. That, she realized, was a change. Chapter 5, Rowan, off duty. The kitchen emptied slowly. Theo had already left, waving over his shoulder and reminding everyone to sign up for next week before the sheet disappeared. A few people lingered, rinsing containers, swapping scraps of conversation, reluctant to break the small spell the room always seemed to cast. Mara stayed because she didn't know how not to. Rowan was stacking cutting boards at the far counter, movements looser than they'd been during class. Their shoulders dropped. The hum under their breath faded into silence. Whatever steadiness they carried while teaching or partnering softened now, something more human showing through. Mara wiped down her station with unnecessary thoroughness, aware of Rowan without watching them. You don't have to help, Rowan said easily. Theo'll tell you it's a community rule, but mostly it's because he hates doing dishes alone. Mara smiled. I don't mind. Rowan nodded, accepting the answer without comment. They worked in parallel for a few minutes, the sounds quieter now, water running, a sponge squeaking against steel. Without the heat of the burners or the crowd, the space felt larger, almost echoing. This is the part one like best, Rowan said eventually. Mara glanced over. The cleaning? The after, Rowan said. When it's just work. No performance. No instructions. Something in their voice shifted, barely, but Mara caught it. She thought of Lena's words, noticed the small things. I get that, Mara said. Cooking feels different when you're not being watched. Rowan laughed softly. Exactly. They rinsed the last pan and leaned against the counter, drying their hands on a towel. Without the apron, Rowan looked different, still solid, still confident, but less contained. Off duty, truly. So, Rowan said, casual but attentive. What do you do when you're not here? Mara considered how much to say. Old instinct tugged at her to keep it light, keep it vague. She resisted. I cook, she said. I read too much. I work a job that pays my rent and takes my energy. I see my friends. I try not to disappear. Rowan studied her, not with surprise but recognition. That sounds like effort, they said. It is. I like effort, Rowan said. It means you care. The words landed steady and unadorned. Not flirtation. Not reassurance. Just truth, offered. Rowan reached into the fridge and pulled out a small container. These are extra, they said. You should take them before Theo decides they're his dinner. Mara accepted it, their fingers brushing briefly. She didn't pull away. Outside, night had settled fully. The street was quieter than earlier in the week, traffic reduced to the occasional car passing with a low hiss. They walked out together, steps naturally matching. You heading this way? Rowan asked. Yeah, Mara said. Same, Rowan said, nodding down the sidewalk. We overlap for a bit. They fell into stride, the sidewalk familiar underfoot. Rowan talked about the class, how Theo had fought for funding, how important it was to keep the space accessible, no sliding scale theatrics. It matters, Rowan said. People deserve places where they don't have to earn comfort. Mara felt that sentence settle somewhere deep. They walked past the bakery, lights off now, the smell of yeast lingering faintly in the air. You're good at this, Mara said, before she could stop herself. At what? Making space, she said. Without announcing it. Rowan slowed, just a fraction. I learned the hard way, they said. It's easier than hardening yourself. The admission hung there, not an invitation to pry, but a door left slightly open. They reached Mara's corner sooner than she expected. Well, Rowan said, stopping. This is me peeling off. Me too, Mara said, though she knew it wasn't true. Not exactly. Rowan smiled, smaller this time. I'm glad you stayed. So am I, Mara said. They stood there for a beat too long to be accidental, not long enough to demand anything. See you next week, Rowan said. Yes, Mara said. No hesitation now. Rowan turned and headed down the block, hands in their pockets, easy again. Mara watched until they were gone, then continued home alone, container warm against her side. Inside her apartment, she set it on the counter and leaned there for a moment, breathing. This felt different from before. Not louder. Not safer. Just real. Chapter 6, The Mother Call. Mara's phone rang while she was rinsing rice. She stared at it for a second longer than necessary, water running over her fingers, grains slipping through the sieve. Mama lit up the screen in the same font it always had, a relic from a time when Mara still thought changing it might change the calls themselves. She answered anyway. Hi, Ma. Marita. Elena Alvarez's voice carried warmth first, then worry, layered so tightly they were hard to separate. Are you busy? I'm cooking, Mara said. But it's fine. Good, her mother said. You should eat proper meals. Not just snacks. Mara closed her eyes briefly. I do eat. I know, Elena said quickly. Never mind. How was your day? It was never mind. Okay, Mara said. I went to my cooking class. A pause. Not long. Just long enough. That's nice, Elena said. With friends? Yes. Another pause, this one more deliberate. Any men there? Mara set the sieve down. The rice sat heavy and white against steel. It's a queer class, Ma. I know, Elena said, flustered. I just mean, someone special. You're not getting younger, you know. Mara felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the reflex to soothe, to reassure, to make her mother's anxiety smaller so it wouldn't spill. I met someone, she said instead. The words surprised her with how steady they sounded. Oh. Elena's voice lifted, hopeful and alarmed at once. Someone? Yes. What does he do? Mara said quietly. They're a chef. Another silence. This one heavier. A chef, Elena repeated. That's hard work. It is. And they're nice? Elena asked, careful now, each word weighed. Yes, Mara said. They're kind. Elena sighed, the sound Mara had learned to hear as concern wearing the mask of love. "I just don't want you to get hurt," she said. "You give so much of yourself. You always do." Mara leaned her hip against the counter. The rice water had gone cloudy in the sink. "I know," she said. "You should think about stability," Elena continued. "About your future. About who will take care of you." The words landed with their usual precision. "Who would choose you? Who would stay?" "I'm okay," Mara said, carefully. "I'm happy right now." "That's good," Elena said, but her tone held doubt. "Just be careful. Don't rush into things. Don't make yourself vulnerable for someone who may not be serious." Mara thought of Rowan's quiet steadiness, the way they cleaned the counter without being asked, the way they looked at her without negotiation. "I'm not rushing," she said. "I'm paying attention." Elena hummed, unconvinced. "I just want what's best for you." "I know." They sat in the space between those words, both understanding and misunderstanding each other perfectly. "Come by this weekend," Elena said finally. "I'll cook. You looked tired the last time I saw you." "I'll try," Mara said. They said their goodbyes gently, as they always did. The call ended without resolution, only residue. Mara set the phone down and turned back to the stove. She added the rice to the pot, measured the water, brought it to a boil. Her hands moved on autopilot, steady and practiced. Her chest, less so. She hadn't pushed back. She knew that. She also knew she hadn't lied. That felt like something. When the rice finished cooking, she fluffed it and plated her dinner, sitting down at the small table by the window. Outside, the neighborhood moved on, someone arguing softly, a bus sighing to a stop, life continuing without commentary. Mara ate slowly. She thought of Lena's voice, blunt and loving. "Say what you want." She thought of Rowan, off-duty, hands in their pockets, choosing ease. Her phone buzzed again. A text from Lena. "Did you survive the mom call?" Mara smiled. "Barely," she typed. "But I didn't disappear." Lena's reply came fast. "Proud of you." Mara set the phone aside and finished her meal. The worry was still there, humming low. Her mother's concern hadn't softened. The future hadn't clarified itself. But Mara stayed in her chair. She didn't rush to clean. She didn't distract herself. She let the feeling exist without shrinking around it. That, too, felt new. Chapter 7, The Invitation. The class ran long. Not officially. Theo still rapped at 9, thanked everyone, reminded them to label containers, but people lingered the way they did when leaving felt like ending something too early. The kitchen held the warmth of cooked food and bodies that hadn't rushed away. Mara moved slower than usual, wiping down her station, rinsing her knife, letting the small rituals stretch. She felt the residue of her mother's call from the night before, like a bruise you only notice when you press it. Rowan stayed too. They were portioning leftovers into identical containers, methodical, unhurried. When they finished, they looked up and caught Mara watching. "Hey," Rowan said. "You okay?" Mara nodded. "Yeah. Just, full." Rowan smiled. "Same." Theo called out from the doorway, keys in hand. "Locking up in 10. Anyone still here is officially volunteering." "Guilty," Rowan said. Mara raised a hand half an inch. "Accessory." Theo grinned and disappeared. They cleaned together in companionable quiet. The burners cooled. The room thinned to echoes. Outside the windows, the streetlights clicked on one by one. Rowan dried their hands and leaned against the counter. "I'm thinking of staying a bit," they said. "There's extra produce that won't keep till next week. I was going to cook something simple." Mara felt the moment open. Not dramatic. Clear. "Oh," she said. "Okay." Rowan waited. They didn't rush the space with reassurance or humor. You're welcome to stay, they added. No pressure. There it was, the careful edge that made the invitation real. A door, not a pull. Mara thought of Lena's voice. Say yes more. She thought of her mother's worry, tidy and heavy. She thought of the way Rowan had offered a spoon without ceremony. Yes, Mara said. The word surprised her with its ease. I'd like that. Rowan's shoulders relaxed, just a fraction. Great. They pulled ingredients from the fridge, odds and ends, a bunch of greens going soft at the edges, a wedge of cheese wrapped too loosely. No recipe. No audience. Mara chopped. Rowan cooked. They talked about small things at first, music they liked to have on in the background, the best way to rescue tired vegetables, how both of them hated food moralizing. I don't do lighter versions, Rowan said, stirring. If something's good, it's good. Mara laughed. Thank you. As the food came together, the kitchen felt different. Quieter. Intentional. The heat stayed low. Rowan tasted and handed her the spoon. What do you think? Mara tasted. It was simple and generous and exactly what it needed to be. Perfect, she said. They ate standing at the counter, trading bites, adjusting salt, unself-conscious. When they finished, Rowan packed the rest into a container and slid it toward her. For later, they said. Outside, the night was calm. They walked together to the corner without talking much, the silence easy. At the stoplight, Rowan glanced over. There's a market on Saturdays a few blocks from here, they said. A bunch of us from the class go sometimes. If you want to come. Another opening. Wider this time. Mara felt the familiar urge to hedge, to say maybe, to keep the future blurry. She felt it and let it pass. I do, she said. Want to? Rowan smiled, open and unguarded. Okay. I'll text you. They parted there, no hug, no rush, just a shared look that lingered long enough to count. Mara walked home with the container warm against her side. She knew this feeling. The edge where wanting turns into choice. She didn't look away. This was the start of something she usually avoided. And she was still walking toward it. Chapter 8, The Date That Counts. The market was louder than Mara expected. Not chaotic, just alive in a way that required participation. Music drifted from somewhere near the flower stalls, something acoustic and cheerful. Vendors called out prices without urgency. Someone laughed too loudly near the bread table. The air smelled like citrus, fried dough, and coffee strong enough to forgive you for needing it. Mara stood at the edge of it, fingers curled around the strap of her bag, taking a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. You wanted this, she reminded herself. You said yes. Rowan spotted her first. They were near the mushroom stand, broad back turned, talking animatedly to Aisha, who had her kid perched on her hip and a tote bag that already looked dangerously full. Rowan wore a loose button-down with the sleeves rolled up, forearms dusted faintly with something, flour, maybe, or just habit. They laughed at something Aisha said, head tipped back, completely unself-conscious. Mara felt it in her chest. That familiar pull. Attraction, yes, but also something heavier. Being seen. Rowan turned, caught her eye, and their face softened instantly, like a room warming when the door closes behind you. Hey, they said, crossing the space without hurry. Not rushing, not making a production of it. Just coming to her. You made it. I said I would, Mara said, then winced internally at the sharpness of it. Rowan only smiled. I know. I'm glad. They didn't hug her. Didn't default to touch. They stood close enough that Mara could feel their presence without being claimed by it. It felt intentional. It felt careful. This is Mara, Rowan said, turning slightly toward Aisha. I've told you about her. Mara blinked. You have? Aisha grinned. All good things, she said easily. You're the one with the knife skills. Mara laughed, surprised into it. Allegedly. Rowan's eyes flicked to her, amused. Confirmed. They talked for a few minutes, about produce, about the class, about how the strawberries were overpriced but still tempting. When Aisha's kids started demanding something fried and immediate, she waved them off. Have fun, Aisha said, eyes warm and knowing without being invasive. Don't let them talk you out of the good cheese. I would never, Rowan said solemnly. They turned back to Mara as the crowd shifted around them. So, Rowan said. Walk? Yes, Mara said. No hesitation. She felt it, acknowledged it, didn't let it drive. They moved through the market together, slow and unhurried. Rowan pointed things out, vendors they liked, stalls that donated leftovers, the best place to get bread if you wanted something dense enough to matter. This is where I usually come after class, Rowan said. Feels good to be around food that isn't trying to sell me a version of myself. Mara snorted. God. Yes. They stopped at a stand selling honey jars with handwritten labels. Rowan picked one up, reading it like it was poetry. You don't have to buy me anything, Mara said reflexively. Rowan looked at her, not offended, not amused. Just present. I know, they said. I wasn't planning to. Heat crept up Mara's neck. Sorry. Habit. Rowan nodded, gentle. I get that. They bought bread. Tomatoes still warm from the sun. Cheese that smelled faintly like grass and milk and indulgence. They didn't discuss who was paying. It sorted itself out without awkwardness or scorekeeping. That, too, felt new. They walked a few blocks to a small park, nothing scenic, just benches and trees and the quiet hum of a neighborhood that didn't need to impress anyone. Rowan set their bag down and sat, stretching their legs out. Mara followed, aware of her body, of the way sitting always came with calculations she wished she didn't make. Rowan didn't comment. Didn't adjust. Didn't offer reassurance. They just looked at her. You look nice, Rowan said. Not as an opener. Not as a hook. As a fact. Thank you, Mara said, and let herself believe it. They ate with their hands, bread torn unevenly, cheese sliced thick without apology. Rowan handed her the better tomato without ceremony. This feels like a date, Mara said suddenly. Rowan stilled, not tense, not alarmed. Just attentive. It is, they said. Mara's pulse kicked. Okay. Rowan turned toward her fully now. I wanted it to be clear. Clear is good. I'm attracted to you, Rowan said. I like you. I don't do vague, and I don't do drifting into something by accident. I wanted to ask you on a date where we both knew what we were saying yes to. Mara swallowed. I'm saying yes. Rowan smiled, small and real. Good. They ate in comfortable quiet for a few minutes after that, the city moving around them. There's something else I want to say, Rowan said eventually. Not as a warning. Just as honesty. Mara nodded. Her hands were steady. She noticed that. I don't date people who are half in, Rowan said. I won't be someone's experiment or soft landing while they decide if they're allowed to want more. The words landed exactly where they were meant to. I'm scared, Mara said instead of shrinking. Of wanting this more than I'm allowed to. Of realizing I've been disappearing for a long time. Rowan listened. I'm here, Mara said. I'm not halfway out. I might just need to learn how to stay. Rowan reached out, not touching her, but close enough to offer the choice. I can work with learning, they said. I just won't work with pretending. Okay, Mara said. When they stood to leave, Rowan walked her back toward her block. At the corner, they stopped. This was a real date, Rowan said. It was, Mara agreed. I'd like another, Rowan said. Mara didn't hedge. I would, she said. Rowan leaned in, not for a kiss, just close enough to say, "Good. So do I." They parted without touching, somehow more intimate for it. Mara walked home alone, bag heavy with food, chest heavy with something else. She had been chosen. And she had been warned. For the first time, she understood those weren't opposites. They were the same door. And she was standing in it. Chapter 9, Public, on Purpose. The event wasn't meant to feel like a test. It was a fundraiser, low stakes on paper. Folding tables, donated ingredients, a banner Theo had clearly printed at the last minute that read, "Community Kitchen Night." Someone had strung fairy lights a little too tightly along the windows, so they dipped in the middle like a tired smile. Mara arrived with a bottle of wine and a practiced calm she didn't fully trust. Rowan wasn't there yet. That alone shouldn't have mattered. She knew they were running late, work ran long, a delivery delayed, something reasonable and adult. They had texted an apology with a thumbs-up emoji that felt reassuring without being sticky. Still, Mara felt the absence. She signed in, handed over the wine, accepted a name tag without comment. She wrote Mara, she/her, and didn't shrink the letters this time. The room filled quickly. People from the class moved easily around one another, familiar hands on shoulders, inside jokes traded near the stove. Theo darted from group to group, clipboard in hand, energy barely contained. "Mara," he called when he spotted her. "You're early." "Bless you." "Habit," she said. He leaned in. Rowan texted, "They're on their way. Trapped in produce hell." Mara smiled. "That tracks." She took a plate and hovered near the counter, chatting with Aisha about knife brands and with another classmate about how impossible it was to keep herbs alive in winter. She felt present. Visible. Fine. Almost fine. At some point, she didn't clock when, a woman she didn't know well slid into the space beside her. Mid-30s, crisp haircut, easy confidence. Someone adjacent to the class. Someone new. "So," the woman said, nodding toward the stove. "How do you know Rowan?" Mara felt the question land gently. "We're dating," she said. The woman smiled politely. "Oh. I didn't realize. I thought you were just friends." The word hit harder than it should have. Friends. It was said casually. Without malice. The kind of default Mara had lived inside for years. Her mouth opened automatically. "It's fine." She felt the familiar urge to smooth it over, to make herself legible by being smaller. To accept the downgrade quietly so no one felt awkward. Rowan still wasn't there. Everyone nearby was listening without meaning to. Mara took a breath. "I'm their partner," she said. Not loud. Not sharp. Clear. The woman blinked, then nodded. "Oh. Got it. Sorry about that." "It's okay," Mara said, because it was. Because she hadn't swallowed herself to make it okay. The conversation moved on. Someone asked about the sauce. Someone laughed too hard. The room kept breathing. But something had shifted. Mara felt it in her body, like standing up straighter without planning to. Like claiming a chair that had always technically been available but never quite felt like hers. Rowan arrived 10 minutes later, cheeks flushed from the cold, hair slightly wind-tossed. They scanned the room instinctively and found her. Mara met their eyes. Rowan smiled and crossed over, setting down their bag before leaning in close. "Hey," they said. "Sorry I'm late." "You made it," Mara said. Rowan squeezed her shoulder briefly, public, easy, unthinking, and turned to greet Theo. They moved through the rest of the night together without fanfare. Cooking. Serving. Laughing with people who already felt like part of something ongoing. Rowan introduced her to a couple of donors as Mara, no qualifiers needed. Still, the moment lingered. Not because anyone else noticed. Because Mara had. On the walk home, the night quiet around them, Rowan bumped her hip lightly with theirs. "You okay?" "Yes," Mara said. Then, because she was learning to stay present instead of safe, she added, "Something happened tonight." Rowan glanced at her, attentive. "Yeah?" "Someone called me your friend," Mara said. I corrected them. Rowan slowed. "And?" they asked. "And it mattered," Mara said. "To me." Rowan considered that, not with surprise, but with care. "Thank you for telling me." They walked a few steps in silence. "I'm glad you did," Rowan said finally. "Correct them, I mean." Mara felt warmth spread through her chest. They reached her block. Rowan stopped, hands in their jacket pockets. "I want you to know something," they said. "I don't need you to be brave for me. I need you to be honest, with yourself most of all." Mara nodded. "I am trying." "I can see that," Rowan said. They didn't kiss. They didn't promise anything. They stood close, breathing the same cold air. When Rowan finally turned to leave, Mara watched them go with a strange, steady feeling. She had spoken aloud. She hadn't waited for permission. The choice was visible now. There was no taking it back. Chapter 10, The Ripple. Rowan didn't hear about it from Mara. They heard about it 2 days later, in the prep kitchen behind the cafe where they did weekend shifts, from a woman who meant it as praise. "You're good for her," the woman said, casual, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mara, I mean." She corrected someone at the fundraiser, said she was your partner. Very confident. I loved that. Rowan froze for half a second too long. "Oh," they said, carefully. "Yeah?" "Yeah," the woman continued, oblivious. "It was nice to see. Not everyone claims things like that out loud." She moved on, already talking about inventory, but the word stayed. Partner. Rowan finished their prep on autopilot. Onions sliced thin. Garlic crushed with the flat of the knife. Motions they could do without thinking, which was good, because thinking had suddenly become loud. They weren't upset. That was the problem. The feeling was subtler, like a weight shifting where it rested. Like a shelf being loaded faster than expected. Rowan had meant what they said to Mara. They didn't do vague. They didn't do half-in. They also didn't do sudden acceleration without checking the ground. They cared about Mara. That was already clear. They liked her steadiness, her humor, the way she paid attention without trying to perform. They liked how being around her didn't feel like work. But being claimed publicly, without them there, tugged at something old. By the time Rowan locked up, the sky had gone soft with evening. They checked their phone. A message from Mara sat unread, sent earlier that afternoon. Had a good time last night. Still thinking about the bread. Rowan smiled despite themselves. They typed, deleted, typed again. Me too, they finally sent. Sorry, work's been a lot today. It was true. It was also not the whole truth. That night, Rowan cooked dinner alone. Something simple. Rice, greens, an egg cracked in at the end. They ate standing at the counter, like always, but the food didn't settle the way it usually did. They thought about how carefully they had built their life. The class. The routine. The way people trusted them to hold space without asking too much in return. They had learned, slowly, painfully, that moving too fast could break things. That being the most visible person in the room sometimes meant becoming the easiest surface for other people's wants to land on. Mara wasn't doing that. Rowan knew that. Still, the ripple spread. The next day at class, Theo mentioned the fundraiser in passing. People loved it, he said. Someone even said it felt like we're becoming a real fixture now. Rowan nodded, heart tightening at the word fixture. Later, Aisha caught them by the sink. Hey, she said gently. You good? Yeah, Rowan said automatically. Aisha raised an eyebrow. You sure? Rowan exhaled. Mara said something the other night. Something real. And I'm proud of her. I just feel pressure, Aisha supplied. Rowan looked at her. Been there, Aisha said. When someone claims you, it can feel like a gift and a responsibility at the same time. Rowan nodded slowly. I don't want to be the thing she proves something with. Aisha smiled, soft. Then don't be. Be the thing she chooses with. The distinction landed, but it didn't solve everything. That night, Rowan texted Mara. Can we talk soon? Nothing bad. Just important. The reply came fast. Okay. Just that. No reassurance layered on. No scrambling. Rowan sat with their phone in their hands longer than necessary. They hadn't expected this, the quiet fear that came not from being unwanted, but from being wanted clearly. They weren't pulling away. But they were bracing. And that, Rowan knew, would matter. Chapter 11, Intimacy Without Safety. They didn't plan it as a turning point. Mara came over after work with a bag of groceries she didn't need and a careful steadiness she'd been practicing lately. Show up, don't brace. Rowan opened the door in socks, hair still damp from a shower, the apartment warm with the smell of toasted cumin and something green simmering gently. Hey, Rowan said. Hey, Mara answered. They stood there for a beat too long, then smiled at the same time, the small awkwardness dissolving without explanation. Rowan stepped aside to let her in. The door closed behind her with a quiet click that felt heavier than it should have. They cooked together without discussing why they were together. It wasn't avoidance so much as instinct, food first, feelings later. Mara washed rice. Rowan chopped vegetables with the easy confidence that usually settled her nerves. Tonight, it only half worked. They moved around each other carefully, like dancers relearning steps they already knew. Rowan brushed past her once, murmured sorry, even though there was no need. Mara noticed. Filed it away. They ate at the counter. The food was good, warm, balanced, generous, but Mara barely tasted it. She watched Rowan instead, the way their shoulders stayed slightly tight, the way their eyes flicked away and then returned, deliberate. You okay? Mara asked. Rowan smiled. Yeah. The word landed flat. Mara nodded and didn't push. She had promised herself she wouldn't interrogate tenderness out of existence. After dinner, they washed dishes side by side. Water ran. A plate slipped and clinked harmlessly against the sink. Rowan laughed a little too loudly, then stopped. Silence filled the space. It wasn't uncomfortable, just charged. Rowan dried their hands and leaned back against the counter. Mara turned toward them, close enough now to feel heat through fabric. Neither of them spoke. There was no script for this part. Rowan reached out first, fingers brushing Mara's wrist in a question rather than a claim. Mara answered by stepping closer. The kiss was slow. Careful. Mouths learning each other without hurry. Rowan's hand came up to Mara's jaw, warm and steady, thumb resting just below her ear. Mara felt herself soften into it before she could think, her own hands finding Rowan's sides, fingers curling gently into the soft fabric of their shirt. They moved to the couch without deciding to, Rowan leading with a light touch on Mara's back. Sitting turned to leaning, then lying down, bodies adjusting naturally to make space for each other. Rowan paused, eyes searching Mara's face. This okay? Yes, Mara whispered, her voice steady despite the quickening pulse in her throat. She tugged lightly at Rowan's shirt. You? Rowan nodded, a small smile breaking through. Yeah. Let me know if anything changes. Clothes came off gradually, each removal checked with a look, a pause, a nod. Mara lifted her arms as Rowan helped with her top, the cool air of the room raising faint goosebumps on her skin. Rowan's shirt followed, revealing the broad curve of their shoulders and the soft give of their chest. Mara traced a finger along Rowan's collarbone, marveling at the warmth, the realness of it all. No performance, just presence. Rowan asked before touching the places that mattered most, their voice low and even. "Can I?" they murmured, hand hovering near Mara's waist. Mara met their eyes, nodding. "Please." It was tender, deliberate. Rowan's palm skimmed over Mara's hips, then her thighs, not rushing but exploring with a quiet appreciation that made Mara's breath catch. She felt seen in a way that wasn't about fixing or admiring from afar, it was about being there, fully. Rowan kissed her stomach with reverence that didn't feel symbolic or corrective. It was soft presses of lips against skin, warm and unhurried, as if savoring the texture, the give. Mara's fingers threaded into Rowan's hair, holding lightly, letting the sensation ground her. In turn, Mara touched Rowan with the same care, her hands on their back, feeling the solid warmth, the subtle shift of muscles under skin. She kissed along their neck, down to their shoulder, inhaling the faint scent of soap and spice that clung to them. Rowan hummed softly, a low vibration that Mara felt more than heard, their body relaxing into her touch before tensing again in response to the building closeness. For a while, there was nothing but sensation. Warm skin against skin. The gentle weight of bodies pressing together, finding rhythms that synced without words. Breaths mingling, quickening, then steadying in shared pauses. Rowan's hand found Mara's, fingers interlacing as they moved closer, the connection a silent anchor amid the vulnerability. Mara felt the barriers she usually held, doubts about her body, her worth, dissolve in the moment, replaced by a raw openness she hadn't allowed herself before. After, they lay tangled together, the room dim except for a lamp left on low. Mara rested her head against Rowan's chest, listening to their breathing steady, the rise and fall a soothing rhythm. Sweat cooled on their skin, and the air held the quiet intimacy of shared space. She felt open. Unarmored. Rowan stroked her arm absently, tracing lazy patterns with their fingertips, but their body had gone a little still, the earlier ease fading into something more reserved. Mara noticed. "You went quiet," she said gently. Rowan didn't answer right away. "I'm here," Mara added, not as reassurance but as fact. Rowan exhaled. "I know." They shifted, just enough to create a small space between them without fully pulling away. The absence registered immediately. "I don't regret this," Rowan said, voice careful. "I just need a minute." Mara nodded, even as something tight coiled in her chest. "Of course," she said. They lay there like that, together, not touching, until the moment lost its shape. When they finally sat up, Rowan handed her a glass of water, movements precise again. The spell didn't break. It thinned. Later, as Mara pulled on her clothes, Rowan hovered near the doorway, hands tucked into their pockets. They didn't offer to walk her home. They didn't suggest staying over. Neither did Mara. At the door, Rowan leaned in and kissed her forehead. "Text me when you get home," they said. "I will," Mara replied. Outside, the night air felt sharper than expected. Mara walked home slowly, the echo of Rowan's warmth still on her skin, the quiet space afterward louder than any argument would have been. She didn't feel used. She felt unmoored. At home, she set her bag down and stood in the kitchen without turning on the light. Her body hummed with aftershock, pleasure, yes, but also a rising awareness she couldn't smooth away. Something had shifted. Not because the intimacy was wrong. Because it hadn't made anything safer. She texted Rowan when she got home. "I'm in. Thank you for tonight." The reply came a few minutes later. "Me too. Sleep well." No heart. No elaboration. Mara set the phone face down and sat on the edge of her bed, hands resting on her thighs. She had chosen closeness. She had not been promised ease. And for the first time, she understood those were not the same thing. Chapter 12, Rowan's Want. Rowan chose a neutral place to talk. Not the kitchen where the class gathered. Not their apartment, still holding the quiet imprint of Mara's body on the couch. They suggested a small cafe on a side street, bright, ordinary, the kind of place where conversation stayed contained by clinking mugs and the low hiss of the espresso machine. Mara arrived first. She picked a table by the window and set her bag at her feet. Her hands were steady. She noticed that, the way you notice progress only when it surprises you. Rowan came in a few minutes later, scanning the room before spotting her. They smiled, relieved, and crossed over. "Hey," they said. "Hey," Mara replied. They ordered coffee. Saturday. Settled. The ritual gave Rowan something to do with their hands. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Rowan broke the silence. "I want to be clear," they said. "Because I owe you that." Mara nodded. "Okay." Rowan took a breath. "I care about you. I like being with you. I don't regret anything we've done." Mara let herself receive it without bracing. "But," Rowan continued, gentle and firm, "I'm feeling the pace." The word landed between them, careful, precise. "I'm not scared of intimacy," Rowan said. "I'm scared of becoming the place where someone proves they're allowed to want more." Mara felt the familiar pull to reassure, to make herself smaller so Rowan wouldn't feel burdened by her wanting. She held still instead. "I don't want to use you," she said. "Or make you carry that." "I know," Rowan said quickly. "This isn't about intent. It's about pattern." They glanced down at their cup, then back up. "I've been the steady one for a long time. The safe one. The one people lean on while they figure themselves out. I don't want to harden, but I also don't want to disappear into someone else's becoming." The cafe noise swelled and receded around them. Mara swallowed. "So what do you want?" Rowan met her gaze, steady as ever. "I want to move forward without being someone's test run. I want to know you'd choose me even if it got uncomfortable, without rushing to name things to make them feel safer." The honesty stung. Mara nodded slowly. "I hear that." Rowan waited. They didn't fill the space. "I've been practicing not shrinking," Mara said. "And sometimes that means I don't know where the line is yet." I said partner, because I was choosing visibility, not because I needed it to lock us in. Rowan considered this, really considered it. "Thank you for saying that," they said. They sat with it, the truth shared without polish. "I'm not asking you to be less," Rowan added. "I'm asking us to slow the labeling while we keep showing up." Mara felt the ache of it, the absence of reassurance, the refusal to promise ease. "And if I can't?" she asked quietly. Rowan didn't flinch. "Then we'll know something important." The words weren't a threat. They were a boundary. Mara breathed in, out. "Okay." Not agreement. Not refusal. Presence. They finished their coffee. Talked about nothing for a few minutes, weather, a book Rowan had started and abandoned. The ordinary details helped the room feel human again. Outside, they stood on the sidewalk, unsure of the choreography. Rowan leaned in and kissed Mara's cheek, brief, affectionate, contained. "Thank you for hearing me," they said. "Thank you for telling me," Mara replied. They parted without drama. Mara walked home with the familiar weight in her chest, but this time, she didn't misname it as rejection. It was information. And it would change what she did next. Chapter 13, Family Dinner. Mara brought bread. Not because her mother had asked, but because showing up empty-handed still felt like a small failure, even at 34. She stopped at the bakery on the corner and chose a loaf she knew her mother liked, soft inside, crust not too hard. Something safe. Elena Alvarez opened the door before Mara had a chance to knock. "Marita," she said, already pulling her into a hug that lingered a second too long. "You look thin." Mara smiled, automatic. "Hi, Ma." "You didn't have to bring anything," Elena said, immediately reaching for the bread anyway. Come in, come in." The apartment smelled like garlic and simmering tomatoes. Familiar, grounding. The television murmured in the background, a telenovela Elena half-watched while cooking. Mara set her bag down and slipped off her shoes. She knew the choreography here, where to stand without getting in the way, when to offer help that would be refused, how to comment on the food just enough. They ate at the small dining table, plates heavy with rice and chicken, Elena watching carefully as Mara served herself. "Are you eating enough?" her mother asked. "Yes," Mara said. "I'm good." Elena nodded, unconvinced. She took a bite, then another, the conversation moving through the usual terrain: work, traffic, the neighbor who parked too close to the driveway. Halfway through the meal, Elena set her fork down. "So," she said lightly. "Any news?" Mara felt the question before it fully formed. "I'm seeing someone," she said. Elena's eyes lit up with cautious hope. "A man?" Mara corrected quietly. "They're non-binary." The word landed and sat there. "Oh," Elena said. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "And what do they do?" "They're a chef," Mara said. "They run a community cooking class." Elena frowned slightly. "That sounds unstable." "Restaurants are hard." "It's not a restaurant," Mara said. "It's community work." Elena waved her hand, dismissive without meaning to be cruel. "I just worry. You've always needed someone steady. Someone who can take care of you." There it was. Mara felt her chest tighten. She thought of Rowan, careful, intentional, unwilling to promise safety where there wasn't any. "They take care of themselves," Mara said. "And they care about me." Elena sighed. "I just don't want you getting hurt. You rush into things when you feel lonely." Mara opened her mouth. Closed it. The words she had practiced: "I'm happy. I choose this. I don't need you to approve," fell away, replaced by the old instinct to smooth, to reassure, to be small. "It's not serious," she said instead. The lie tasted bitter. Elena relaxed visibly. "Good. That's good. Take your time. You don't need complications." Mara nodded, staring down at her plate. The food had gone cold. They finished dinner without returning to the subject. Elena wrapped leftovers, pressed them into Mara's hands, kissed her cheek at the door. "Call me when you get home," she said. "I will," Mara replied. Outside, the night felt heavier than it had an hour ago. Mara walked to her car slowly, the bread bag empty, her chest full of something sharp and sour. She pulled out her phone, typed a message to Rowan, then deleted it. Dinner was fine. She didn't send anything at all. At home, she set the leftovers in the fridge and leaned against the counter, eyes closed. She had told her mother it wasn't serious. After everything, after choosing visibility, after intimacy, after honesty. The shame came quietly, like a fog rolling in. Not because her mother had disapproved. Because Mara had disappeared again. And this time, she knew it. Chapter 14, Love as Practice Fails. Mara decided to be careful. It felt responsible. Kind, even. After the dinner with her mother, after Rowan's clarity at the cafe, careful seemed like the most loving thing she could offer. Careful meant less. She texted Rowan first the next morning, short, light, easy. "Hope your day's calm. No rush on tonight." Rowan replied a few minutes later. "Thanks. You okay?" Mara stared at the question longer than necessary. "Yeah," she typed. "Just busy." The lie slid out smoothly. They still saw each other. Mara made sure of that. She showed up to class on time. She brought ingredients. She laughed at the right moments. She kept her body angled just a little farther away. She didn't touch Rowan unless Rowan touched first. She didn't bring up the cafe conversation. She didn't ask for reassurance. From the outside, it looked like maturity. From the inside, It felt like erasing pencil lines she had just learned how to draw. Rowan noticed immediately. They always did. In class, Mara partnered with someone else when the stations rotated, offering Rowan an easy out with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Rowan accepted it without comment, and that, too, felt like a small loss. Later, while wiping down counters, Rowan glanced over. "You good?" "Yes," Mara said. "Really?" The word really made it worse. Rowan nodded, but their gaze lingered, searching. After class, when people filtered out in clusters, Rowan didn't suggest staying late. Mara told herself that was fine. It was what she wanted: space, clarity, no pressure. On the walk outside, Rowan slowed to match her pace. "You're pulling back," they said. It wasn't an accusation. Mara's first instinct was denial. Her second was explanation. She chose neither. "I don't want to make this harder than it needs to be," she said. "For you." Rowan stopped walking. "That's not your job," they said quietly. Mara swallowed. After what you said, I figured I should adjust." Rowan's expression shifted, something guarded sliding into place. "Adjust how?" "By not asking for more," Mara said. "By being easier." The word hung there between them. Rowan exhaled slowly. "Mara, I asked us to slow labels, not for you to disappear." "I know," Mara said quickly. "I'm not disappearing. I'm just being considerate." Rowan shook their head once. "That's not what this feels like." They stood under the streetlight, the space between them suddenly loud. "I need to know you wouldn't choose me only when it's safe," Rowan said. "Or only when I'm not asking for anything." The sentence landed like a fault line. Mara felt the truth of it, sharp and immediate. "I thought I was protecting you," she said. Rowan's voice softened. "From what?" Mara didn't answer. Because the answer wasn't about Rowan at all. It was about her mother's sigh. About the word complication. About the old belief that love was something you earned by being manageable. Rowan waited. "I don't want to be chosen only when I'm easy," they said. "I need to know you'd choose me even if I walked away." The words hurt because they were true. Mara felt herself fracture, not break, but split open. "I don't know how to do this without hurting someone," she admitted. Rowan nodded. "Me neither. But shrinking isn't the same as care." Silence settled. Finally, Rowan stepped back. "Not leaving, just creating space." "I think we need a pause," they said. "Not to punish. To see what's real when you're not editing yourself." Mara's chest tightened. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying I can't keep reaching for you while you're moving away," Rowan said. They didn't argue. They didn't raise their voice. They said goodnight and walked in opposite directions. Mara stood there long after Rowan disappeared down the block, the streetlight buzzing faintly overhead. She had tried to love by becoming smaller. And it had failed. This time, she couldn't pretend she didn't know why. Chapter 15, The Argument. They didn't plan to talk again so soon. Mara told herself she would give it a few days. Let the pause do what pauses were meant to do: settle things, reveal truths. She went to work. She answered emails. She cooked meals that tasted fine and fed no one else. On the third night, Rowan texted. "Can we talk?" Mara stared at the screen until the words blurred. "Yes," she typed. "Where?" Rowan suggested the park near the community center. Neutral ground again. Familiar, but not intimate. The benches were cold. The lights overhead flickered like they might give up at any moment. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked once and then went quiet. Rowan arrived first this time, standing instead of sitting, hands shoved into their jacket pockets. When they saw Mara, they straightened. "Hey," Rowan said. "Hey," Mara replied. They stood there for a moment, neither of them moving closer. Rowan spoke first. I don't think the pause is working, they said. Mara nodded. I don't think it's supposed to feel like this. Rowan exhaled sharply, the sound edged now. I keep replaying our conversations. Trying to figure out where we stopped talking to each other and started managing each other. Mara flinched. I wasn't managing you. I was trying to respect what you asked for. I asked for honesty, Rowan said. Not distance. The words landed hard. I don't know how to do this without losing you, Mara said, the admission tearing out of her before she could soften it. Rowan's jaw tightened. And I don't know how to stay if you only choose me when it's safe. There it was. Not as a boundary this time. As a wound. Mara felt heat rush to her face. That's not fair. Rowan laughed once, humorless. Isn't it? You asked me to slow down, Mara said. So I did. You asked me not to label things. So I didn't. And now you're saying I disappeared. Because you did, Rowan said. You went quiet. You stopped touching me. You stopped letting me see you want me. Mara's chest ached. Because every time I wanted you, I heard my mother's voice telling me not to make things complicated. Because I've spent my whole life learning how to be palatable so people don't leave. Rowan's expression flickered, pain, recognition, frustration layered together. And I can't be the place where you practice not disappearing, they said. Not if it costs me my footing. The sentence hit like a blow. So what are you saying? Mara asked, quietly now. I'm saying I need to know you choose me even if I walked away, Rowan said. Not chase me. Not shrink yourself to keep me. Choose me because you believe you deserve to be chosen back. Mara shook her head, tears finally spilling. That feels impossible. Rowan's voice softened, but the resolve didn't. Then I can't stay. Silence fell between them, thick and absolute. Mara felt something inside her give, not a crack, but a release. The last illusion that this could be fixed with the right tone, the right compromise. I love you, she said. The word surprised them both. Rowan closed their eyes. That's why this hurts, they said. And why I can't pretend it's enough. They stepped back. I need to walk away, Rowan said. Not forever. But for now. Mara nodded, numb and shaking. Okay. Rowan hesitated, then reached out, not to pull her close, just to touch her hand once. Brief. Grounding. Final. Take care of yourself, they said. You too, Mara replied. Rowan turned and walked away, their figure shrinking under the flickering lights until they disappeared entirely. Mara stayed. She stood in the cold until it seeped through her coat, through her skin, into the place where hope had been living. She had wanted love without bargaining. She had lost it by trying to negotiate her own worth. And for the first time, she didn't blame Rowan for leaving. She blamed the part of herself that had believed disappearing was the same as care. Chapter 16, The Class Without Rowan. Mara almost didn't go. She stood in her kitchen with her keys in her hand, the clock ticking louder than usual, every excuse lined up and reasonable. She could skip 1 week. No one would question it. Absence had always been her most reliable skill. She went anyway. The community center looked the same from the outside, lights on, windows fogged slightly from heat and bodies. The familiarity hit harder than she expected. She paused before opening the door, then pushed it open with a steadying breath. The kitchen was already alive. Theo stood near the whiteboard, marker in hand, talking too fast. Someone laughed near the sinks. The smell of onions and citrus cleaner mingled in the air. Everything was exactly where it should be. Except Rowan. Mara felt the absence immediately, not like a missing object, but like a missing temperature. The room ran cooler without them. Theo spotted her. Hey, he said, bright as ever, then hesitated, just a fraction. You good? Yes, Mara said. She meant, I am here. He nodded, accepting the answer for what it was worth. Grab a station. We're doing soups tonight. Big pots. No rules. No rules. Mara chose a spot at the far counter. She set her bag down, tied an apron around her waist. Her hands shook as she reached for a knife. She waited for someone to comment. No one did. She chopped carrots first. Then onions. The rhythm steadied her. The sound of the blade against the board anchored her back into her body. Across the room, someone asked Theo a question Rowan would have answered without thinking. Theo stumbled through it, laughing at himself. The class adjusted, seamlessly and imperfectly. That hurt more than she expected. Rowan hadn't been the glue. They had been a presence. Mara tasted the broth as it simmered. It was fine. It would be better with time. Aisha slid into the space beside her without announcement. Hey, she said softly. Hey. They worked in parallel for a few minutes. I'm glad you came, Aisha said eventually. Mara nodded. Me too. You don't have to explain anything, Aisha added. Just in case you were wondering. Mara swallowed. Thank you. Theo called everyone together to taste and adjust. People circled up with spoons, offering opinions freely. Mara listened, contributed when she had something real to say. She didn't defer. She didn't disappear. When someone asked, "Where's Rowan tonight?" the room went quiet for half a beat. Theo answered easily. They're taking a little time. No speculation. No drama. Mara felt the relief and the grief land together. She finished class without rushing. Cleaned her station. Packed leftovers into a container she hadn't planned on taking home. Outside, the night air was sharp. The street looked the same as always. Mara stood there alone. She felt exposed, visible without the buffer of being chosen by someone else. It hurt. But it didn't erase her. She walked home slowly, container warm against her side. For the first time since Rowan left, she didn't feel like she was auditioning for her own life. She was simply in it. Chapter 17, Notes on the Counter. Mara didn't cook the next day. She stood in her kitchen, coffee cooling untouched, and looked at the counter where things tended to collect, mail she meant to open, a rubber band she kept forgetting to throw away, the folded recipe cards from class. They had been there for weeks, shifting slightly every time she wiped the surface, never fully put away. She spread them out now. Handwriting overlapped. Rowan's neat, slanted print. Theo's arrows and exclamation points. Someone else's looping cursive that leaned optimistic. Notes crowded the margins: add acid, don't rush the onions, salt earlier than you think. Mara picked one up and smiled despite herself. On the back of a card, Rowan had written, "Comfort isn't the same as small." She sat down at the table and let the card rest against her palm. For a long time, she had believed comfort was something you earned by being unobtrusive. By not asking questions that took too long to answer. By choosing the quiet option even when it left you hollow. She turned the card over and over, like it might reveal something new. Her phone buzzed. A message from Lena, "You alive?" Mara typed back, "Barely." "Come over," Lena replied. "Or don't. But eat something." Mara smiled, then put the phone face down. Not avoidance, just choosing stillness. She opened her laptop instead. It was an impulse she didn't interrogate. She pulled up a blank document, then hesitated, fingers hovering over the keys. She thought about the class, the way stories slipped out while chopping vegetables, the way people talked more honestly with their hands busy. She started typing. Not a recipe. Not exactly. She wrote about the first time she learned to cook for herself instead of for approval. About hunger that wasn't just physical. About meals that tasted better when no one was grading them. She paused, reread, deleted a paragraph, wrote another. The words came unevenly, but they came. When she finished, she scrolled back to the top and added a title. Notes on the counter. She closed the laptop without saving. Then she opened it again and did. That night, she cooked. Nothing ambitious. Rice, vegetables, an egg. She ate standing at the counter, tasting as she went, adjusting without apology. The food fed her. That felt like enough. Before bed, she lined the recipe cards back up, but she didn't tuck them away. She left them where she could see them in the morning. They weren't instructions. They were evidence. She slept deeply for the first time in days. In the morning, the ache was still there. But it no longer felt like absence. It felt like space. Chapter 18, The Costly Choice. Mara didn't plan to share it. She told herself the document on her laptop was just a place to put things so they wouldn't rattle around in her head. A holding pattern. Private. Safe. But the words kept coming. Each night after work, she cooked something small and wrote beside it what she noticed, what surprised her, what she had learned the hard way. She didn't soften the language. She didn't translate it into something aspirational or tidy. She wrote about hunger without apology. About bodies without improvement arcs. About love that didn't save you but taught you how to stand. By the end of the week, the document had weight. Not length. Weight. Theo texted on Sunday afternoon. Thinking of doing a short write-up for the community newsletter, he wrote. Something about why the class works. Want to contribute a paragraph? Mara stared at the message. Here it was. She could send something easy, a quote about belonging, a line about accessibility. She knew how to make herself sound agreeable without saying anything that would ask for space. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She opened her document. Scrolled. Stopped at a paragraph she hadn't meant for anyone else. This food is not a reward for shrinking. It is not fuel for becoming someone else. It is here because we are here. Mara's chest tightened. She imagined her mother reading it, lips pressed thin with worry. She imagined strangers misunderstanding it, flattening it into something trend-adjacent. She imagined Rowan, not approving or rejecting, just absent. She could protect herself. She could choose safety. Instead, she copied the paragraph. She added one sentence at the top, simple and unadorned. This is why the class matters to me. Then she hit send. The response didn't come right away. Mara paced her apartment, cleaned the counter that didn't need cleaning, stared out the window at a street that knew nothing about her small act of defiance. An hour later, Theo replied. This is beautiful, he wrote. Are you okay if we run it as is? Mara sat down. Her hands shook. Yes, she typed. Please don't edit it to make it gentler. A pause. I won't, Theo replied. Thank you for trusting us. The trust landed heavier than praise. The newsletter went out that evening. Mara didn't refresh obsessively. She didn't post it anywhere. She made dinner and ate it slowly, letting the moment pass without trying to control it. Her phone buzzed once. A message from a number she didn't recognize. I read what you wrote, it said. I didn't know I was allowed to feel like this about food. Thank you. Mara's throat closed. Another message followed. Then another. Quiet acknowledgements. Not viral. Not loud. Real. She sat at her table and cried, not from grief this time, but from the strange relief of having said something true without bargaining for its reception. Later that night, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Rowan. I saw the newsletter, they wrote. I'm proud of you. Mara read the words carefully. They weren't an invitation. They weren't a promise. They were recognition. She typed back. Thank you. And nothing else. She set the phone down and returned to her kitchen, to the counter where the notes still lay in plain sight. She understood something now. She hadn't written to be chosen. She had written to be aligned. If Rowan came back, it would be because they met her there. If they didn't, this would still stand. The cost had been real. So was the ground beneath her feet. Chapter 19, Reunion with Conditions. Mara didn't plan the meeting the way she used to plan difficult conversations. There was no script. No bullet points. No mental rehearsal of how to sound reasonable, calm, unthreatening. She didn't dress to look impressive or apologetic. She wore jeans that fit her without negotiation and a sweater soft enough to remind her she was still in her body. She chose the cafe because it was neutral. Because it wasn't theirs. Because it had windows that let the afternoon in without making a show of it. Rowan was already there. They stood when they saw her, not abruptly, not with the stiff urgency of someone bracing for impact. Just, present. Their hands were wrapped around a mug. Their shoulders looked looser than they had the last time Mara had seen them. "Hey," Rowan said. "Hey," Mara replied. They hugged, brief and careful. Familiar without being assumptive. When they pulled apart, Mara felt the absence immediately, and noticed she didn't panic about it. They sat. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The cafe filled the space the way it always did, cups clinking, someone laughing too loudly near the counter, steam hissing from the espresso machine. Ordinary life continuing without waiting for them to catch up. Rowan broke the silence first. "Thanks for coming," they said. "Thanks for asking," Mara said. Rowan nodded, as if filing that away. "I wanted to see you. I just needed it to be clear." Mara met their eyes. "Me too." That surprised them both. Rowan leaned back slightly, fingers still warm around the mug. "I don't want to repeat the last version of us," they said. "Where everything feels right until it suddenly feels like too much." Mara didn't flinch. "Okay," she said. Rowan blinked. "Okay?" "Yes," Mara said. "I agree." There it was, the old instinct to rush in with reassurance, to say "I'll be better, I won't scare you, I'll do it right this time." She felt it rise and let it pass. Rowan watched her closely. "So," they said carefully, "what happens when it gets hard again?" The question landed exactly where it was meant to. Not accusatory. Not defensive. Real. Mara didn't answer right away. She thought of the class without Rowan. Of the way her hands had shaken and then steadied. Of speaking without an audience of one. Of how claiming herself had felt heavier, and cleaner, than she'd expected. "When it gets hard," she said finally, "I don't disappear." Rowan's expression didn't change, but something in their posture sharpened. "I don't pull back to make you comfortable," Mara continued. "And I don't perform closeness to keep you from leaving. I stay. I tell you what's happening instead of trying to manage it alone." Rowan studied her, eyes searching her face for something they weren't sure they wanted to find. "That's a promise," they said. "No," Mara said gently. "It's a practice." That did it. Rowan exhaled slowly, the breath leaving them like something they'd been holding for a while. "I don't need forever language," they said. "I need consistency. I need to know I'm not the thing you reach for when you're trying to prove something, to yourself or anyone else." Mara nodded. "I know. And I need to know," Rowan added, quieter now, "that if I step back instead of forward, you won't chase me out of fear." Mara felt the truth of that settle in her chest. Old Mara would have flinched. Old Mara would have rushed to soften it. This time, she didn't. "I won't chase," she said. "But I won't shrink either." Rowan held her gaze. "That's different," they said. "I know." Another silence, but this one felt earned. Weighted. Not brittle. Rowan reached for their mug again, took a sip they didn't need. "I'm not saying yes yet," they said. "Not because I don't want to. Because I do." Mara smiled faintly. "I figured." I need to see how this looks when it's not just chemistry and relief, Rowan said. When it's ordinary. Mara nodded. Me too. They both laughed softly at that, at how unromantic it sounded and how much it mattered. So, Rowan said after a moment, what does trying look like to you? Mara didn't reach for poetry. It looks like me showing up even when I'm unsure, she said. Like telling you when I'm scared instead of acting like I'm fine. Like not making you the center of my self-worth, but also not pretending I don't care. Rowan watched her like they were watching someone chop an onion, attentive, respectful, waiting for the moment that revealed skill. And you? Mara asked. Rowan smiled, small and real. It looks like letting you see me hesitate. Not presenting steadiness like it's armor. Saying when I'm overwhelmed instead of pulling away quietly. Mara felt something loosen. Okay, she said again. Rowan reached across the table, not to touch her hand, just to rest their palm on the space between them. An offering. Not a claim. We can try, they said. Slow. Honest. With check-ins. Mara placed her hand over theirs. Yes, she said. They didn't kiss. They stayed like that for a while, hands warm, the world continuing around them. When they finally stood to leave, Rowan walked her to the door. I'm glad you didn't reassure me, Rowan said quietly. Mara smiled. I'm glad I didn't have to. Outside, the air was cool and ordinary. They stood on the sidewalk, neither of them in a hurry. This isn't fixed, Rowan said. I know, Mara said. It might get messy, Rowan added. Mara met their eyes, steady. I'm not afraid of mess anymore. Rowan smiled, really smiled. Good, they said. Neither am I. They parted without ceremony. Mara walked home alone, heart full but not frantic. She didn't replay the conversation looking for cracks. She didn't brace for loss. She had shown up as herself. Whatever came next would have to meet her there. Chapter 20, Practice, Not Promise. They didn't announce it. There was no moment where they sat down and labeled what they were doing, no ceremonial resetting of expectations. They just kept going. Carefully. On purpose. The first practice was small. Rowan texted Mara 2 days after the cafe. Cooking class tonight. I'll be there early. No pressure to stay late. Mara read it twice before replying. I'm coming. And I might stay. Rowan's response came back a minute later. Good to know. No hearts. No reassurances. Just information exchanged honestly. That night, the community center kitchen felt familiar again, but different. Like returning to a room after rearranging the furniture. The walls hadn't moved. The light was the same. But the way they occupied the space had shifted. Rowan didn't default to standing beside her. They greeted her warmly, checked in with Theo, helped unload produce. Mara noticed, and didn't interpret it as distance. She took a station near the window and set up her cutting board without looking for permission. When Rowan joined her later, it was deliberate. Hey, they said. Hey, Mara replied. They cooked without choreography. Sometimes they worked shoulder to shoulder. Sometimes they split tasks across the room. When Mara asked a question, Rowan answered plainly. When Rowan needed space, they took it without apology. Mara felt the old urge to monitor, to track tone, to measure proximity, to adjust herself in response. She noticed it, named it silently, and let it pass. That was the practice. After class, Rowan wiped down their station and waited. Mara finished packing leftovers, then walked over on her own. Walk? Rowan asked. Yes, Mara said. They stepped into the night together, no hurry. Half a block in, Rowan spoke. I'm tired, they said. Not of you. Just, today. Mara nodded. Thanks for saying it. They walked in quiet for a few minutes, the city offering them its ordinary soundtrack: cars passing, someone unlocking a bike, laughter drifting from a bar down the street. This time, they didn't stretch the walk. At the corner, Rowan stopped. "I'm going to head home." "Okay," Mara said. No disappointment curled in her chest. No reflexive tightening. Rowan smiled, softer. "Tomorrow?" Mara considered, not whether she wanted to, but whether she had the space. "Yes," she said. "But I'm cooking." Rowan laughed. "Deal." The second practice was harder. Mara's mother called on a Thursday afternoon, voice tight with concern dressed as casual conversation. "You sound busy," Elena said. "Are you eating properly?" Mara leaned against her kitchen counter, phone warm against her ear. She thought of the groceries she'd bought intentionally. Of the food waiting for her. "Yes," she said. "You don't have to rush into anything," her mother continued. "People like that, creative, uncertain, they don't always think long-term." Mara felt the old pull to soften the moment, to reassure her mother at her own expense. "I'm not rushing," she said instead. "And I'm not asking you to evaluate my choices." Silence. "I worry," Elena said finally. "I know," Mara replied. "And I still need you to trust me." When the call ended, Mara stood very still. Her hands shook, not badly, but noticeably. She didn't text Rowan right away. That was the practice too. Later that night, she did. "Hard conversation with my mom. I'm okay. Just wanted you to know where my head's at." Rowan replied a few minutes later. "Thank you for telling me. Do you want company or quiet?" Mara smiled. "Quiet tonight. Company tomorrow." "Okay. I'm here. No fixing. No pressure. Just presence offered cleanly." The third practice surprised them both. They argued. Not loudly. Not cruelly. Over something small, whether to include personal notes alongside recipes Theo was compiling for the class newsletter. Rowan hesitated. Mara felt herself bristle. "This matters," Mara said. "People connect to the stories." "I know," Rowan replied. "I just don't want to put anyone on display without consent." The room tightened. Old patterns stirred, Mara's urge to retreat, Rowan's instinct to protect the container at all costs. They stopped. "Wait," Mara said. Her voice was steady. "We're doing the thing again." Rowan blinked, then nodded. "Yeah. We are." They sat down at the counter, not touching, not avoiding. "Okay," Rowan said. "Say it." "I'm afraid that if we always prioritize safety, we'll erase the point," Mara said. "And I don't want to disappear again." Rowan absorbed that. "I'm afraid that if we move too fast, we'll hurt people who trusted us." They sat with that truth, unornamented. "What if," Mara said slowly, "we ask? Instead of assuming?" Rowan's shoulders dropped. "That makes sense." They didn't resolve everything. They didn't need to. The practices stacked quietly. Showing up without performing. Saying no without apology. Naming fear without letting it steer. One night, standing in Rowan's kitchen, Mara noticed something had changed. Not the intensity. The weight. She wasn't holding the relationship together by vigilance. It existed because they were both choosing it, again and again, in small, unglamorous ways. Rowan handed her a spoon. "Taste?" Mara did. She smiled. "Need salt?" Rowan grinned and added a pinch. "This isn't a promise," Rowan said quietly. Mara met their eyes. "I know. It's a practice." "Yes," Mara said. And meant it. They ate standing up, adjusting as they went. The food was imperfect. It fed them anyway. Chapter 21, The Pushback. The pushback didn't come from strangers. That was what made it sting. It came wrapped in encouragement, in careful smiles and well-meaning concern. It came from people who believed they were helping. The idea had been simple at first. Theo mentioned it offhandedly during cleanup one night, waving a stack of printed recipe sheets like they were an afterthought. People keep asking for copies, he said. Not just the recipes, your notes. The stories you two keep scribbling in the margins. It feels important. Rowan glanced at Mara. Mara felt the word important land somewhere warm and dangerous. So we're thinking, Theo continued, voice picking up momentum, what if we compile them? Nothing fancy. A PDF. Maybe something we can share with folks who can't make it to class. Mara's first instinct was delight. The second was fear. She let both exist. I'd want the stories to stay intact, she said carefully. Rowan nodded. Same. Theo smiled. Of course. I mean, mostly intact. The qualifiers slipped by easily. Too easily. The meeting was a week later, held in the community center's small conference room. Fluorescent lights. Folding chairs. A table scarred with old marker lines and coffee rings. Theo sat at the head, energized and earnest. 2 volunteers from the center joined them, people Mara recognized from fundraisers and planning committees. Nice people. Organized. Well-spoken. Rowan brought a folder. Mara brought her notebook. They reviewed logistics first. File formats. Distribution. Consent forms. All reasonable. All necessary. Then someone said it. Some of the language is very personal, one of the volunteers offered, flipping through a sample page. Which is powerful, but might limit who feels comfortable engaging with it. Mara felt her shoulders tense. What do you mean? Rowan asked calmly. Well, the volunteer continued, choosing words with care, there's a lot about bodies. Desire. Shame. It's beautiful, but maybe we frame it more, universally? Theo nodded slowly. Like focusing on food as nourishment. Healing. Wellness. The word hit Mara like a cold draft. Wellness. She waited for Rowan to speak. They did, but cautiously. I don't want this to turn into something that tells people how to fix themselves, Rowan said. That's not what the class is. Of course not, the other volunteer said quickly. But framing matters. We don't want to alienate anyone. Mara understood the math immediately. Too specific meant too fat. Too honest meant too queer. Too much meant inconvenient. She felt the familiar urge rise, the one that told her to compromise early, to offer something smaller before someone took it from her entirely. She didn't act on it. What exactly would you remove? Mara asked. The volunteer hesitated. Not remove. Just soften. For example, this section about eating without apology, maybe we shift it toward balance? Or self-care? Mara's fingers curled around her pen. That section is the point, she said. The room went quiet. Rowan turned toward her, surprised, not at the content, but at the certainty. Theo cleared his throat. I think what they're saying is, we want this to reach people. And sometimes accessibility means adjusting language. Mara nodded slowly. Accessible to whom? No one answered right away. She pressed on, voice steady. Because the people this is for already understand it. They don't need it translated into something safer. One of the volunteers smiled, tight. But if we want funding support. There it is, Mara said, not unkindly. Rowan inhaled sharply. Mara felt the room tilt, not dramatically, but decisively. This was the edge she'd been approaching since Chapter 1, whether she'd known it or not. I don't want to make something that apologizes for existing, she said. If that means fewer people read it, I can live with that. Silence. Rowan looked at her for a long moment. Then they spoke. I agree, they said. If the stories can't stay whole, I don't want to do it. Theo blinked. Wait, really? Yes, Rowan said, calm but firm. This doesn't work for me if it asks us to flatten the reasons people trust this space. The volunteers exchanged glances. Well, one said finally, we just want to be careful. Mara met her gaze. So do we. They left together, the hallway quiet around them. Rowan didn't speak until they reached the door. You didn't look at me before you said that, they said. Mara's stomach dropped. I should have. No, Rowan said, stopping her gently. I mean, you didn't need to. They stepped outside into the evening air, both breathing a little harder than before. I was ready to compromise, Rowan admitted. You weren't. Mara nodded. I've done that my whole life. It never ends where I think it will. Rowan smiled, proud, and a little shaken. You changed the shape of the room. Mara laughed softly. I was terrified. I know, Rowan said. You did it anyway. They stood there, side by side, watching the streetlights flicker on. This might cost us, Rowan said. Support. Resources. I know, Mara said. Rowan turned to her. Are you okay with that? Mara didn't answer right away. She thought of the long years of hunger, emotional, physical, unnameable. Of how much of herself she'd trimmed in advance. Yes, she said finally. I'd rather choose alignment than reach. Rowan nodded slowly. Me too. They walked home together, not talking much. Something had shifted again, not toward safety, but toward truth. And neither of them looked away. Chapter 22, Alignment over Reach. The doubt didn't arrive all at once. It came in pieces. An email that didn't get answered. A meeting that was postponed indefinitely. A shift in tone so subtle Mara almost missed it, until she didn't. Theo stopped using exclamation points. That was how she knew. They were still friendly. Still polite. But the energy had changed. Where there had once been momentum, there was now caution. Where there had been curiosity, there was silence. No one said no. They just stopped saying yes. Mara noticed it first because she was paying attention, not with vigilance, but with honesty. The old version of her would have rushed in to fix it. She would have drafted a compromise before anyone asked for one. She would have softened the language herself and presented it like a peace offering. This time, she didn't. Rowan noticed it next. They're backing away, they said one evening, leaning against the counter in Mara's kitchen. Not dramatically. Just, strategically. Mara nodded. I know. Rowan studied her. You're not panicking. Mara smiled faintly. I already did that part. Years ago. They cooked together without much conversation, the quiet between them companionable rather than tense. When the food was done, they ate standing up, plates balanced in their hands. After a while, Rowan spoke. If this only ever reaches the people already in the room, they said, would that be enough for you? Mara didn't answer immediately. She thought of the notebooks. The margins crowded with handwriting. The stories that had surfaced without permission once the chopping started. She thought of the class without Rowan, and how the room had still held her. Yes, she said finally. It would. Rowan nodded slowly. I think it would be for me too. They let that settle. The conversation came later, with Lena, over takeout containers and lukewarm wine. So let me get this straight, Lena said, fork paused midair. You made something real. People asked for it. And then they wanted you to sand off the parts that made it real. Mara laughed. When you put it like that, it sounds obvious. It is obvious, Lena said. You're just not used to choosing yourself when the alternative is approval. Mara leaned back in her chair. It still feels like I'm doing something wrong. That's because you're breaking an agreement you never consciously made, Lena said. The one where you stay palatable in exchange for belonging. Mara felt the truth of that land, heavy and clean. Does Rowan know you feel like this? Lena asked. Yes, Mara said. And they're not trying to talk me out of it. Good, Lena said. That would have been a red flag. The next class was quieter. Not empty, just different. A few regulars were missing. A couple of new faces hovered uncertainly at the edges. Theo ran through the lesson with his usual care, but something was restrained. Mara chopped onions and listened to the room breathe. At one point, someone she didn't recognize leaned over and said, "This is my first time. I almost didn't come, I didn't know if I'd belong." Mara smiled at them. You do. The words came easily. Later, as they packed up, Theo approached them, hands tucked into his pockets. I hope you know, he said carefully, that I support what you're doing. I just have to balance a lot of interests. Mara nodded. I understand. And she did. Understanding didn't require compliance anymore. That night, Mara sat alone at her table, notebook open. She reread a story she'd written about hunger, not the metaphorical kind, but the literal one. About learning to eat without apology. About pleasure that didn't ask permission. She closed the notebook. Rowan was right. This didn't need to reach everyone. It needed to reach the people who had been waiting to hear it. She texted Rowan. I'm okay with smaller. The reply came back quickly. Me too. Mara set the phone down and breathed. The fear was still there, but quieter now. Less persuasive. She hadn't chosen safety. She had chosen alignment. And for the first time, that felt like enough. Chapter 23, The Boundary, Misheard. Mara's mother cooked too much. She always did. The table was already crowded when Mara arrived, pots overlapping, lids tilted to let steam escape, the smell of garlic and vinegar settling into the walls the way it always had. Elena moved through the kitchen with practiced urgency, apron tied tight, hair pinned back neatly. You look thin, her mother said immediately. Mara paused, then smiled faintly. I'm not. Elena waved a hand, already turning back to the stove. Sit. Eat while it's hot. They did, the ritual familiar enough to carry them through the first few minutes without comment. Rice fluffed too generously. Chicken braised until it barely held together. A dish Mara had grown up with, cooked the same way every time. It tasted like history. You're working too much, Elena said eventually. You sound tired when you call. I am tired, Mara said. But not unhappy. Elena frowned slightly. Those are often the same. Mara set her spoon down. This was the moment she used to miss, where concern slid quietly into correction. I want to talk to you about something, Mara said. Her mother looked up, alert now. Is something wrong? No, Mara said. But something is changing. Elena's shoulders tightened. You're not quitting your job. Mara smiled, small. No. Good, Elena said. Stability is important. Here it comes, Mara thought. She felt the old reflex, the urge to reassure, to soften the edges before they cut. She didn't. I'm in a relationship, Mara said. And I'm building something that matters to me. Elena nodded cautiously. I know. With the chef. With Rowan, Mara said gently. Elena hesitated. Yes. Them. Mara waited. I just don't want you to get hurt, Elena said finally. You give your heart too easily. The words were familiar enough to almost feel affectionate. I'm not asking you to stop worrying, Mara said. I'm asking you to stop warning me every time I tell you I'm happy. Elena blinked. That's not what I'm doing, she said quickly. I'm being realistic. Mara nodded. That's what I'm talking about. Her mother sighed, the sound weighted with years of unsaid things. You think I don't want you happy? I think you want me safe, Mara said. And I need you to understand that safety isn't the same as small. Elena stiffened. Small? Yes, Mara said. Her voice was steady. You talk to me like I should always be preparing for disappointment. Like I need to prove that I deserve good things. Elena shook her head. You're twisting my words. Mara felt the familiar drop in her stomach, the moment where understanding used to collapse into apology. She didn't apologize. I'm setting a boundary, she said. I need you to trust that I can choose my life, even if it scares you. Elena looked wounded. So now I'm not allowed to care? There it was. Mara breathed. You're allowed to care, she said. You're not allowed to manage my fear for me. Silence filled the kitchen. The food cooled. Elena stood abruptly, gathering plates with more force than necessary. I sacrificed everything so you could have options, she said. And now you're telling me I'm the problem. Mara's chest tightened. I'm not, she said. I'm telling you I'm choosing. Elena turned away. We'll see how long that lasts. The sentence landed like a verdict. Mara felt it, the ache, the instinct to fix, to explain better, to promise she wouldn't fail. She stayed seated. I'm going to go, Mara said quietly. Elena didn't turn around. Call me when you calm down, she said. Mara stood, heart pounding. I am calm, she said. I just don't agree with you. Her mother didn't respond. Mara gathered her bag and walked to the door. Her hands shook as she put on her shoes. She waited, just a second, for Elena to stop her. She didn't. Outside, the air was cool and sharp. Mara stood on the sidewalk, breathing until the tightness in her chest eased enough to move. She didn't cry. Not yet. She walked home alone. Later that night, she sat at her table, notebook open, the page blank. She wrote one sentence. I can love you without living inside your fear. She closed the notebook. The boundary hadn't been understood. But it had been held. And that, she realized, was the point. Chapter 24, A Recipe for Us. They didn't plan to write it together. It happened the way most of the good things had, slowly, sideways, without ceremony. Rowan was at Mara's table, sleeves pushed up, notebook open between them. The window was cracked just enough to let the evening in. The kitchen smelled like onions softening in oil, the low heat doing its patient work. This doesn't need to be perfect, Rowan said, pen hovering. Mara smiled. Good. Because it won't be. They stared at the blank page for a moment longer than necessary. Then Mara wrote the heading. A Recipe for Us. Rowan watched the words settle, then nodded. Okay, they said. Start wherever you want. Mara thought about beginnings. About first dates and near misses and hunger she hadn't known how to name yet. She didn't start there. She wrote. Ingredients. One person who learned to stay small to survive. One person who learned to stay steady so nothing would break. Bodies that take up space and refuse to apologize for it. A kitchen that isn't quiet. Fear that still shows up uninvited. A shared belief that pleasure is not a moral failure. Rowan read it slowly. When they finished, they added a line beneath. The willingness to be seen on ordinary days. Mara felt that one land. Method. Rowan took the pen this time. Begin without promises. Cook at a heat you can sustain. When something burns, name it. When someone pulls back, ask why before assuming. Taste often. Adjust gently. They paused, then looked at Mara. Your turn. Mara added. Do not confuse safety with silence. Do not trade honesty for harmony. Leave room for mess. Rowan smiled. Especially that one. Notes. They wrote these together, voices overlapping. This dish will not look the same every time. Some days it feeds you more than others. Old fears may resurface, this does not mean it's failing. There is no lighter version. Serve without explanation. Mara capped the pen and leaned back. This feels real, she said. Rowan nodded. That's because it is. The onions were ready. Rowan scraped them into the pan, added salt by feel. Mara stirred, wooden spoon scraping softly against the bottom. They cooked the rest without speaking much, hands moving around each other with easy familiarity, tasting, adjusting, laughing quietly when something splattered. When the food was done, they didn't plate it. They ate standing up, straight from the pan, passing the spoon back and forth. The flavors were good, not perfect, not measured. Enough. Mara leaned her hip against the counter, full in a way that had nothing to do with quantity. We don't have to follow it exactly, she said. Rowan smiled, brushing their thumb against her wrist. No. We wrote it so we'd remember. They stood there, bodies at ease, the recipe open on the table behind them. Neither of them reached for it again. Chapter 25, The Last Scene. They cook without looking at the page. The notebook lies open on the counter anyway, spine bent, the ink already smudged in places from use. It isn't precious. It doesn't need to be. The kitchen is quiet in the way that means settled, not empty. Evening light slips in through the window, catching on the rim of a bowl, the curve of a shoulder, the steam rising gently from a pot left just a little too hot. Rowan hums while they chop. Mara notices, because she always does. She stands at the stove, wooden spoon in hand, stirring slowly. She isn't performing calm. She is calm. Her body feels like it belongs to her again, solid, warm, unquestioned. Too much salt? Rowan asks, glancing over. Not yet, Mara says. But it will be. Rowan smiles and waits. They move around each other easily. No choreography, no apologies. When they brush past, it's because the space is shared, not negotiated. When Rowan reaches for a spice, Mara steps aside without thinking. When Mara leans back, Rowan is there, steady. The food comes together imperfectly. A sauce breaks and then comes back together with a little water and patience. Something sticks to the pan and is scraped free, darker than intended but good anyway. They taste. They adjust. They taste again. At one point, Mara catches her reflection in the darkened window, her own face flushed from the heat, her body relaxed, taking up space without commentary. She doesn't look away. Rowan sets the pan off the heat and hands her the spoon. You. Mara tastes. She nods. Now. Rowan adds salt. They eat standing up, straight from the pan, forks optional. The food is rich and grounding and deeply familiar. Not impressive. Satisfying. Mara leans her hip against the counter. Rowan stands close, not touching, not distant. This is good, Mara says. Rowan nods. It is. They don't talk about the future. They don't talk about the book, or the class, or who will read the stories and who won't. All of that exists, but it doesn't need tending right now. What needs tending is here. Mara reaches out, resting her hand against Rowan's forearm. Solid. Warm. Real. Rowan turns slightly, forehead touching Mara's temple for just a moment. Enough. The stove clicks as it cools. Outside, a car passes, music leaking briefly into the room before fading. Mara thinks, not for the first time, that love feels less like a rival and more like inhabiting a space you've learned how to keep. They don't need the recipe anymore. They made it to remember how they love.